So today, as I mentioned, we're going to have Judith read for us where we're going to be today. So, like I said, we'll probably get up right to Psalm 92, which is one that might be familiar to people because it's from the Psalms of Shabbat. There is actually one psalm we already read for Psalms of Shabbat, what we call the Kabbalat Shabbat. That's Psalm 29. But the main bulk of them are in the 90s. And so we normally talk about Kabbalat Shabbat. We're thinking of Lecha Dodi, which is maybe the most famous part of Kabbalat Shabbat, but it really is Kabbalat Shabbat is the Psalms plus Lecha Dodi. And some synagogues, more Orthodox, traditional synagogues will do a Hatzi Kaddish. Actually, really, really religious synagogues will do a Kaddish Shalem and a Kaddish to Rabbanan, a Kaddish for the rabbis. They'll do at the end of Kabbalat Shabbat. So it's almost like a mini service. So yeah, so we'll get right around to that today. Last week we also read Psalm 82, which I pointed out. Yeah, they'll do a Hatzi Kaddish there. They'll do a Hatzi Kaddish just before the Amidah. It's kind of a demarcation prayer. So last week we read Psalm 82, which we pointed out is a very polytheistic. Oh, there's John in person. It's a very polytheistic prayer. You know, kind of has almost a pagan feel to it. Psalm 82. It's not funny, man. It's scary. It's only scary because you could totally understand it. She did, so.
I'd argue with you.
Okay, all right. So I can't even lift my arms right now. You could defeat me. I can't lift my arms. I had a flu shot here and a COVID shot there. So I can't lift my arms. Can't lift my arms. All right. So Psalm 84 is where we're going to start, and it begins with a direction on the gitit, which we found a few times. We've already seen that a few times, probably an instrument or a style of playing music. And this goes back to, again, the Korahites, the Korach, the Korahites. The second most ascribed psalms after David are the Korahites. And then this just simply says a mizmor, a psalm, to translate the Korah, Korahites, right? The Bnei Korach. All right, so let's take a look at this one, which you may have heard parts of this one before, but let's take a look. Judith?
How lovely is your dwelling place, O God of hosts. I yearn for the courts of the Eternal One. My body and soul shout for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself in which to set her young. Near your altar, O God of hosts, my monarch and my God. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They forever praise you. Selah. Happy are those who find refuge in you, whose mind is on the highways. They pass through the valley of Baca, regarding it as a place of springs, as if the early rain had covered it with a blessing. They go from rampart to rampart, appearing before God in Sion. O eternal God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob, Selah. O God, behold our shield. Look upon the face of your anointed. Better one day in your courts than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather stand at the threshold of God's house than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the eternal God is sun and shield. God bestows grace and glory and does not withhold bounty from those who live without blame. O God of hosts, happy is the one who trusts in you.
Yeah. And so this psalm, even though it doesn't say it's a psalm of David, definitely seems like a psalm that like a king or somebody who lived in Jerusalem would write. So it's interesting that it definitely seems like people are talking about going on pilgrimages or going up to Jerusalem. They definitely seem to, Zion is definitely a big part of this. Being in the temple, being in, being in this this area. This is not what we call one of the songs of ascent, one of the pilgrim psalms, which we're going to get to in the 120s, but that does seem like this. Seems like a definite praise of being in in being in Jerusalem, how important it is to be in Jerusalem. So some of these lines in this prayer are used in other prayers that we do. So it's actually good timing. Does anyone know one of these lines? This one, Adonai Tzvaot Ashrei Adam B'tach Becha. This is actually, this last line, line 13, is a line that some people do before Havdalah, which is a good thing to remind people that Havdalah is coming up this Saturday night. But verse 13 is one of those lines that traditionally was said at the beginning of Havdalah. In other traditions in churches and stuff like that, this psalm was oftentimes used to dedicate a church or an altar when it was first opened. Why? Because it talks about being in the house of God, how great it is to be in the house of God.
Mark,
yes. Okay. Yes, you're 100% right. Let's get back to what you were singing.
Oh, I was also going to ask you, if you go to the house of God as being an afterlife, this is very much in favor of the afterlife.
You think so? Oh, yeah. If you think it.
If you go to that it's talking about the afterlife, happy are those who dwell in your house.
Oh yeah, but doesn't it seem from the context that it's talking about people who are literally living in Jerusalem or going to Jerusalem, making a step in Jerusalem? It's better to be at the threshold, on the outside of the door rather than being in the house, inside a house of somebody who's wicked, right? So it seems pretty clear that they're literally talking about the house, right?
Yeah. So, but is it ever used otherwise, like the afterlife? Obviously.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just like Psalm 23, right? Right. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord, forever. It doesn't actually say that. It says for many long days. It says la'orech yamim, which is even worse than le'olam va'ed, because that you can at least say it forever and ever. There it's pretty clear that it's like for a long time.
Right.
Like I want to be there. But yes, it's very similar in Psalm 20 to Psalm 23 and other Psalms that we read. But yes, let's get back to what you said about Ashrei Yeshvei, which is from Psalm 145. It's from Ashrei. But it's not, it's here. It's in Psalm 145 and it's also here. So here's a line that we read directly in another psalm. Not even a question that that's the same line. The next line is different. Ashrei Adam Ozlo Becha Misalot Bilvavam, which is specifically about the highways, the Mislot, it's basically, the people have the highways in their mind or in their heart. This is Levavam, in their lev. Yeah, but it's another Ashrei though. It's another Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha, Ashrei, So this is an Ashrei, how blessed or happy. We talked about the word Ashrei, whether we translate it as happy or blessed, but there it is. And again, it's at the very end. I think there was another Ashrei. Somewhere there was another Ashrei. Maybe not. No, I know what there was at the end. There was another how good it is, right? Kitov, how good it is. And there's the Ashrei. Ashrei Adam B'tach B'cha. Yeah. Happy is the one who trusted you. So there's the other Ashrei. It doesn't begin the line, but it's in the middle. So again, this psalm is again, how great it is to be in Jerusalem, how wonderful it is to be in your presence, God, to be by your altar. It's a really nice psalm of the pilgrim, if you will. We don't know if Valley of Baca is actually a place. So they didn't translate it as that. We don't know because it's the only place we ever hear the word Baca, the Valley of Baca. Now, what's interesting is it's not interesting. It's kind of sad. So Baca means tears, right? Let's just see. Emek Habaka, the Valley of Tears, right? So is that literally a place or is it a state of mind, right? I don't know whether the translations have. Mary, what does yours say? Yeah. So the word Baka right here, right? Emek means valley. We know that, right? Emek, right? So that's why the Hebrew school in the valley, the Orthodox Hebrew school, is called Emek, because it's the valley, Emek Academy. But Baka means tears. So it means the valley of tears. But we don't know if that's that we don't know if it's a
That's a
place that they
metaphor
call
or a place.
Yeah, and that's why they don't translate it. Glory, what does your translation say?
It says Valley of Baca, but my notes says Baca means either weeping or balsam trees.
Yeah,
The place is unknown and may be figurative for arid stretches the pilgrims had to traverse.
yeah. So I only want to point this out because it does actually become a place, and you can go visit it. And we oftentimes take people here, depends how much time we have to spend here. But we go up to the Valley of Baca. This is not the Valley of Baca that was mentioned in the Bible. This is what we call the Valley of Tears. And for those who are familiar with the Yom Kippur War, this is a valley where Israel fought a crazy tank battle against the Syrians. There was a movie that came out, a miniseries that came out a couple of years ago that they had on HBO. I definitely recommend it if you have HBO Max. I think it's probably still there. Actually, I'm not positive if it's still there, but they did a let's see if it talks about it here. They did the miniseries is called Valley of Tears, and it's about the Yom Kippur War, and it's a much better uh, take on the Valley of Tears battle, and which is mentioned in the Golden movie, but it's much better description of what happens in the Yom Kippur War than the Golden movie. So for people who want to know more about what happened in Yom Kippur War, this Valley of Tears is the movie to see about it. So yeah, they still have some of the tanks that were left over from the war are part of the they're part of the it's a pretty emotional place because the Israelis who were defending it were pretty much wiped out. But what they did at the Valley of Tears, it's kind of like an Alamo story where they were able to fend off the Syrian tanks. And you can see right here, the 7th Brigade lost about 50 dead and many wounded and were left with fewer than 45 working tanks. And that was, by the end of the Yom Kippur War, I think pretty much everyone was gone. But let's just see. Yeah, so I guess it says there were 20 tanks left. You see this? The Syrians lost over 500 tanks and APCs, and the Israelis lost 60 to 80 armored vehicles. And so what they told people after that was, you've saved the people of Israel. That's what they told them, because if those tanks had gotten through from Syria, it would have wiped out the entire north of Israel. There was nothing else. There was nothing left. There was no position that could stop the tanks from moving right through the. So this is why, I mean, there's a scene in Golda where if you saw the movie, you'll remember it, where Moshe Dayan is flying over the Valley of Tears in a helicopter, and he's freaking out because he says there's no way for us to survive. He said it's over. So they did, and again, I'm not going to get into the details of how it happened, and again, how they were able to do it, but they did it because, like every other war in Israel, they had no choice, and they're not, they have nowhere left to go. So, yeah. So until October 7th, this battle killed more people, more Israelis than any war, any engagement, since then, the Valley of Tears. A lot of Israelis died in Lebanon over 15, 20 years. A lot of Israelis died in Gaza over the last 25 years. But as far as like over a battle, this was the one. So yeah, there ended up being a Valley of Tears, believe it or not. There ended up being a place where this stuff happened. So we just made it from somewhere in the modern times. All right. So let's take a look back at that. So for me, when I hear Valley of Tears, I always I always go to that. I always think about the modern day Valley of Tears, which was from Yom Kippur. All right, so let me put up. Let me put up.
It's where I told my children, I gave them credit for visiting Syria because you could see the lights.
Yeah, yeah, you can see Syria right from
You
there.
can see Syria right from there. And I said, this is the closest.
Well,
we're
if it
gonna
hadn't
get
been for the
going.
soldiers who defended Israel in the Valley of Tears, it would all have been a part of Syria.
Yep.
All right, so this is Psalm 85. But we went there were tanks there. Yeah. Well, that was the highest
Thanks
part.
and flags.
That was Ben Tal. That was the top. That's the top. That's the highest place you can go. Valley of Tears is right next to it. It's just down. Yeah, it's down. It's not Ben Tal where we saw the UN people. It was right down next to it, and it's a monument now. It's a monument to the people who died. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people just look at it and go, if they understand anything about tanks or what would have happened, Israel, they had no defense. I mean, I guess Israel could have, thrown airplanes at it. It wasn't like, but it would not have been a good situation. It would have been a very dangerous situation. All right. It's very much like an Alamo because most of the people who were there died. Most of the Israelis who were defending it were wiped out. So this is Psalm 85, which again is a Korachite psalm. It says Lam Natseach for the conductor, for the leader, and it says Mizmor. So those are the directions that we have. And let us hold it 1 second. But yeah, it's kind of emotional for me to think about the Valley of Tears because I try to take people there if we have enough time. We're always kind of running short on time in the Golan because we want to show people lots of stuff in the Golan, but it's emotional. It's an emotional place. I want people to see it. All right. So here's Psalm 80. Oh, sorry. This is Psalm 85. I'm going to show Psalm 85 on the page here. I want you to see it first. All right, let's go.
O Eternal One, you will favor your land, restore Jacob's fortune. You will forgive your people's iniquity, pardon all their sins, Selah. You will withdraw all your anger, turn away from your rage. Turn again, O God, our helper, revoke your displeasure with us. Will you be angry with us forever? Prolong your wrath for all generations? Surely you will revive us again, so that your people may rejoice in you. Show us, O Eternal One, your faithfulness. Grant us your deliverance. Let me hear what God the Eternal will speak as a promise of well-being to the faithful ones, this people. May they not turn to folly. Help is very near those who show reverence to make God's glory dwell in our land. Faithfulness and truth meet, justice and well-being kiss. Truth springs up from the earth, justice looks down from heaven. God also bestows bounty. Our land yields its produce. Justice walks in front as God sets out on the way.
So this is a really interesting psalm. It's obviously kind of on the shorter side, but it's a really beautiful psalm. Again, as you can see, some of the words are about, some of the themes are about forgiveness. So in some traditions, some of these verses are used during Slichot and during Mincha and Yom Kippur and different times. During high holidays, people would maybe turn to some of these to these lines because it's about forgiveness. There's also definitely this sense that it definitely is a sense of like we're going to get forgiven and God will make things right. And God making things right is not just like you get to live in your home and you get to be free and all those other things that we think about like national identity. It's also this idea that there is going to be, when God is fully manifest in our midst, that this is where values will be enacted. It's not just we get to have power, but these things get to happen. And this is a beautiful line. faithfulness and truth meet. Chesed ve'emet nifgashu, which is they meet, they come together. But this phrase is beautiful. That's why I actually put it out on this week's summary. Tzedek v'shalom nashku, which is justice. Tzedek is justice and righteousness. And you know what shalom means. They translated it as well-being. But couldn't you say it justice and peace? Couldn't you say it justice and
peace?
Everything that shalom means to you. It does mean fullness and completeness. But this idea that they kiss is obviously, it's a synonym for what we have, chesed ve'emet, right? So we have chesed and emet. We have a faithfulness or righteousness, or however you want to translate chesed, which there's a lot of translations for chesed. Emet, we usually translate it as truth, but chesed and emet, justice or faithfulness, and truth. And then tzedek, righteousness, justice, and peace. So these four values are laid out here as things that come together in a peaceful and in a place where God exists, which I think is a really beautiful idea. So needless to say, during the Middle Ages, people, or not just the Middle Ages, but throughout artistic times, here's 3 pictures of this. Actually, here's 4 pictures of it. It's interesting that justice and peace are usually ladies, but they're kissing. It's weird, right? The guys aren't kissing. They don't have guys kissing, but these representations of mercy and truth. And here's the kiss, right, between justice and peace.
Ooh.
Wow, right?
Racy.
A little racy. But this one, they actually may be a guy and a girl. I can't tell. No, I think it's 2 girls. But usually it's 2 women kissing. Interesting, right? Of course, in the Christian stuff, you oftentimes see the dove, the Holy Spirit, representing the Holy Spirit. But representing these values, right? Representing justice, peace, truth, and how are we going to translate chesed, faithfulness. So it's a nice image. It's nice imagery, right? And it says right here, the 4 virtues, mercy, truth, righteousness, or justice, and peace, are allegorized as the 4 daughters of God. The psalm has also been quoted in nonviolent movements, for example, in a 1993 document of Catholic bishops for its verse, "For he will seek peace unto his people." So here you have the fact that for some theologians, mainly Catholic theologians, this line, this motel, there's another one. There's another justice. And you think some of these guys were just looking at ways to paint women kissing each other? I think so.
Yes, I do.
I think some of them were taking advantage of that line. But you can see that this is something that you see in Bernard of Clairvaux. He was one of the Knights Templars, by the way. And he was known for his role in some of the monasteries. But it's interesting, though, that they say that this might have been based on Jewish Midrash, which talks about truth, justice, mercy, and peace as the 4 standards on the throne of God. So that maybe some of the Kabbalistic and mystical ideas that were coming out of Judaism were inspirations for that. It's possible. It's also possible that, look, it's it's possible that they, people read the Psalm and were fascinated by that idea. I think it's just there's beautiful imagery there. And I'm just showing you that it inspired people of all religions, but I think it really inspired, if you want to know the truth, based on what I see, because we don't use it a lot. I think it really inspired Christianity almost more than Judaism, at least in the artistic depictions, or at least things that I've seen. But there you go. You saw it in the pictures.
By the time Judaism was making images of humans, it had already been appropriated, if you will.
Yeah, look, if you made that picture today, if you were a Jewish artist, people would say, yeah, Christians have been doing it for, 1,000 years. What are you messing around with this now? But it would be interesting to see how Jewish artists would treat those scenes. But yeah, you're right. How would you do it without knowing that there were, you couldn't. I mean, I guess you could if you were completely oblivious. But look, let's face it. Anybody, Judith, who's going to do depictions of that in representational human forms is not Orthodox, because they're doing it in representational forms. And if they're not Orthodox, they've probably seen the Christian versions of those. So I don't know if it's possible, to your point again, for you to draw those without being influenced by the Christian versions of that.
Yeah.
So, and again, we don't use it a lot. We don't use that phrase a lot. It's not like we invoke that phrase in prayers. It's not like we've pulled that out and used it in others. But I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful phrase. I think it's a beautiful phrase of, look, when God is here, those things are here too. And they're happy, and however you want to understand is kiss. I mean, if you want to know the truth, I don't think they had to literally kiss. Like, the word neshek in Hebrew definitely means kiss, don't get me wrong, but it also means to touch, really. Like, it really means to, like, when we say, like, when something kisses something, like when you say your car kissed my car, we don't mean it kissed it, we mean it hit it, right? It touched it. And we mean that, like, the 8-ball kissed the, whatever. We know that it also means to touch. And I think it means also that in Judaism. I think meeting and touching are kind of used synonymously there. But whatever, if you want to use kiss, I mean, you definitely use it for kiss, but it's to get really, really close to something too. So meeting and kissing are used synonymously there, but it could also be, again, meaning. I could also argue that you could translate it as meeting and touching. They touch. But it's a place where they intersect. It's a place where they come together. It's a place where it's a place where they're not far apart, if you will. Okay. So, which, by the way, if you want to get really mystical about it, if you think about it, if justice and peace are together, that means you're not running around. If you think about it, and I think people, I mean, I'm telling you what some of the Jewish teachings about these aspects of the divine are, especially in Kabbalah. It's not like these are different things. They're not different gods. But if they're in balance in God, then that's a good thing. So if God doesn't have to be a God of justice, it means God isn't running around punishing people. So if justice and peace are on the same level, it essentially means they're regulated. If one's really high and the other one's really high, they're not in balance. If God can have those things in balance, or we can have those things in balance, whatever you want to say, then things are good, right? So when truth and love are together, right, that's good. Think about it. And I don't want to get too mystical about it. And it's not really mystical, it's pragmatic too. If you're running around telling everybody the truth, and you have to, because everything is so messed up that you have to say, but that's not the truth, you're oftentimes not also practicing chesed, because you're that guy that runs around, or that woman that runs around telling everybody, well, you don't know the truth, right? I'm going to tell you the truth. That's not really chesed. That's not really loving kindness. That's like being brutally honest. But if you can be brutally honest and also have compassion, that means you're not having to correct people that much, right? It means people are at a point where they don't need a lot of your heavy duty emet. They can deal with your chesed. And on the other hand, if things are really, really bad and people are like steeped in the worst part of the truth, then you need to come to them. And I'm not saying that chesed means you lie to them, but like an extreme of chesed, an extreme of loving kindness is going to somebody and say, oh, it's really not that bad. When it is bad, then you just lied. You had to lie because it is really bad and you wanted to get somebody out of that dark place. So if chesed and emet are balanced, it means that things are good, because you can be truthful and you can also be loving. You don't have to like balance it out, right? Compensate. You say, I'm compensating. You don't have to do that. So I think there's a good lesson in that. I think when it says that those things are touching each other, it means that one of them is not way out of whack. And that's the way I understand it. And I think that's really the way it was intended, by the way, without saying, hey, look, what does that really mean? That they love each other? They're kissing each other? No, they're there together and they can be
They're
together.
together when they can.
They're not on opposite ends of the room right now because one's not taking care of business and the other one is out to sleep. Anyways, that's my little thing about the four virtues or those four aspects. All right. So 86 is simply called a tefillah LeDavid, which we don't have that phrase a lot. We've talked about this in Psalms already, that we don't have the word tefillah a lot. We have mizmor, we have a lot of times it will say a maskil, or it will say it actually doesn't say tehillah a lot, but sometimes it says tehillah, which is the root of psalm, if you will, song. Anyways, but tefillah, we don't have a lot, but that's why I translated it as a prayer of David. And so that's what it begins with. We translated here tefillah as prayer. I mean, I'm sure like Mary, your translation is a prayer of David, right? It's really, we still use the word. Tefillah means prayer. So is this more of a prayer than some of the other ones? I don't know, but it definitely does seem like a prayer. But is it more of a prayer than other Psalms? I don't think so. But this one is called a prayer of David. All right.
Incline your ear, O Eternal One. Answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am steadfast. O you, my God, deliver your servant who trusts in you. Have mercy on me, O my sovereign, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant's life, for on you, my sovereign, I set my hope. For you, my sovereign, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call on you. Give ear, O Eternal One, to my prayer. Heed my plea for mercy. In my time of trouble, I call you, for you will answer me. There is none like you among the gods, O my sovereign, and there are no deeds like yours. All the nations you have made will come to bow down before you, O my sovereign, and they will pay honor to your name. For you are great and perform wonders. You alone are God. Teach me your way, O Eternal One. I will walk in your truth. Let my heart be undivided in reverence for your name. I will praise you, O my sovereign, my God, with all my heart, and pay honor to your name forever. For your steadfast love toward me is great. You have saved me from the depths of Sheol. O God, arrogant people have risen against me. A ruthless band seeks my life. They are not mindful of you. But you, O my sovereign, are a God compassionate and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Turn to me and have mercy on me. Grant your strength to your servant and deliver the son of your maidservant. Show me a sign of your favor that my enemies may see and be frustrated, because you, O Eternal One, have given me aid and comfort.
So Psalm 86. Psalm 86, right, has got some lines that we use a lot in Judaism. It also, by the way, seems to have that little piece of it that seems like it. Is there only one God? You're the God who's the best of all the gods, but does that really mean that? Again, this is, there definitely seems to be a structure to this psalm that this person is, praying to God and hoping to find, forgiveness and salvation and peace. People, there's a line in this, actually the line that we just talked about that seems like it's almost pagan in a way. Line 8. There is none like you among the gods, O my sovereign, and there are no deeds like yours. Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'ma'asecha, malchutecha, malchut kol olamim. Yeah, that part's not there. But the first part is Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai, right? It's what we say when we open an ark for the Torah, the Ein kamocha prayer, or the Ein kamocha line that we say when we open up the ark. it's interesting because if you look at the text, it says Ein kamocha va'Elohim. There is nothing like you amongst the gods, right? And there it seems like Elohim are other gods, not you, God. So, but the phrase Ein kamasecha, there are no deeds, there is nothing done like the things that you do. And it, I mean, literally the next line though affirms that this is not our God, right? This isn't our God that's better than every God. All the nations you have made, and they will come down and bow to you, and they will pay honor to your name. So whatever it means that there are other gods or there are other people or whatever else, they don't mean anything because all the nations you have made, right? And you know, you alone are God. I mean, there isn't a sense really that there are other gods, even though the phrase seems to imply that there are other gods. I mean, you know, look, is it proof that they believed in only one God? Not necessarily, because it could be read that you alone are God for us. Other people might have other gods too, but there really is. And here the word Elohim is used for God, right? You are the only God, and it's clearly not a plural there. So, yeah. So there's definitely this sense that that God is not just our God, but God for everybody. But there does seem to be, again, this praise of God that is, if the language doesn't sound fully monotheistic, it definitely is that God is alone, and there is nothing that does things like God. And so, and it's for everybody. And this is a universal understanding of that too. Again, a lot of the other Psalms, a lot of the rest, the Psalms we've read in the past have this understanding that like other people are getting away with stuff, other people are bad, and I'm trying to do good, and please, understand that, right? Arrogant people have risen against me, and they don't pay attention to you. So there is that sense of, again, I'm in a bad situation. People around me are doing bad stuff, and And again, so you can understand why people would say this psalm when they were in a bad situation, when they're dealing with bad stuff, when they feel like they're under attack. That this psalm would be another psalm where people would kind of turn to this as a psalm of protection too. And so you can see why, again, not a very long psalm. I mean, it's actually 17 verses, which, as I told you, is the length of the average psalm. This is like the psalm that is like, if you looked at like an average psalm, this is like the psalm, because it's got those same themes that we've read through most. Again, it's enough where people will say, did we borrow this from some other source? Did we borrow this and adapt it a little bit? But again, it has lines that we've taken out and used in other prayers. It's got a lot of things that are like that we see in the Psalms that we've read up until now. So yeah, this is like the psalm of, like, if somebody said to me, hey, is this the psalm that like sums up all the other psalms? Yeah, kind of. It's very similar to that. But again, the fact that it says a prayer, you can understand why people really see this as a prayer, really. Psalm 86 as a prayer. There's one other psalm that's called.
Oh, and it says, answer me. It says,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Tefillah
that.
LeMoshe. There's one that's called a prayer of Moses, Psalm 90, but which we're getting to. But Psalm, here the psalm is a psalm. It says of a prayer of David, and it does actually literally say, right? It says, you've heard my prayer, right? It says this line, give, O Eternal, as Judith said, hear my prayer, hear my plea for mercy. It's Adonai tefilati, my prayer. So you can understand why, again, it's a prayer. It doesn't just say it at the beginning, which wasn't there originally, right? It has the word tefilati in there. But it's not the only psalm that says that. But it's one of the few psalms that actually says it's a prayer. All right. And again, the summary line, the wrap-up line, show me a sign of your favor that my enemies may see you and be frustrated, because you, O Eternal, have given me aid and comfort. I mean, that's like, this is, God, bring it on, give me what I need, right? Give me, take action and make this stuff happen, right? Make my enemies be frustrated, right? So that's Psalm 86. And now let's turn to Psalm 87, which is another psalm of the Korahites. It's also just the Mizmor is used and Mizmor Shir, right? So a psalm and a song are used. And again, we don't know how they're different. Okay, we don't know how a psalm and a shir are different. A Mizmor and a shir are different. We don't know. But clearly they made there was a differentiation with this, with how it was done, right? Whether it was done with a intention for how it would be played, or whether it was sung with a cappella, or this one can be done a cappella, but it also can be done with music, with instruments. We don't know. We don't know if it has that same kind of meaning that we aspire, or we think it should have with that. But again, it's also traditionally a song of the Korahites. So let's take a look.
We'll scroll back down. Did we read the temple's foundation?
Yeah.
Okay, the temple's foundation on the holy mountains. The temple's foundation on the holy mountains, the gates of Zion, God loves more than all the dwellings of Jacob. Glorious things are spoken of you, O city of God, Selah. I mention Rahav and Babylon among those who acknowledge me. Philistia and Tyre and Cush, each was born there. Indeed, it shall be said of Zion, they were all born there. It is the Most High who will preserve it. God will inscribe in the register of peoples that each was born there, Selah. Singers and dancers alike will say, all my roots are in you.
So 7 verses, right? This has only 7 verses. But look at what it just did. It just called out other nations, right? And here, this was interesting because Rachav is usually known as a primeval monster. Now, we also know that there's a woman named Rachav who's mentioned in the story of Joshua as the prostitute who takes care of the Israelite spies when they come into the land. So it was also a proper name. But here we're talking about Rachav, who is a primeval monster and a poetic term specifically for Egypt. So in Isaiah, we can see clearly that Rachav, here's the line. Geez, they didn't even translate the word Rachav.
Yeah.
They didn't even give you any indication of this. But it's very clear that Mitzrayim and Rachav are synonymous. Yeah, that's a horrible translation. Yeah, that's an example of something that I didn't even catch when we read it in Isaiah, where it actually is one of those instances where it talks about Rachav. So Rachav is mentioned in the Midrash. Rachav is mentioned in the Talmud and legends as one of these monsters that God destroyed, like Leviathan. But yeah, it's interesting that it didn't even translate it there. I don't know. Does yours translate it, Mary, in Isaiah? When it goes to Isaiah, does it translate it? I don't know. If you take a look at Isaiah, if you look at Isaiah 37, whether it says Rachav there. But it's clearly meant to be Egypt and Babylonia. What does it say for Rachav? Well, I mean, it's interesting that Isaiah 30, verse 7. Isaiah 30, verse 7. Yeah, this Bible did not. I mean, the JPS didn't translate it. Maybe the new JPS did. 30, verse 7. Would it say Mitzrayim, something about Egypt? It doesn't? But what does it say? What does 30, verse 7 say? For the help of Egypt. Yeah, so the King James doesn't translate Rahav at all either. So maybe that's why they haven't. But yeah, I
Mine
mean,
calls it the do nothing. Therefore I call her Rahab the do nothing.
huh.
And
Okay.
then my note says Rahab, a sea monster, here symbolic of Egypt.
Yeah. Now we know that, right? So I mean that's why the note says it, but here they actually translated it as that. So look, they also could have like pulled it out and said, I mentioned Egypt and Babylon amongst those who acknowledge me, right? What's interesting about that is like, really, do the Egyptians and the Babylonians acknowledge you? Do they? Because Rahav of Bavel, now you can say that Rahav of Bavel is like poetic. It's more poetic to say it. It's not a common thing, but we know that Rahav is a sea monster. It's like that's not a question, and it's a sea monster that they ascribe to Egypt. So maybe it's like the great alligator. Just bear with me for a second. The point is we know that they're only talking about nations here: Philistia, Tyre, right? The Philistines, Tyrians are the Phoenicians, and Cush, who is modern day Sudan and Africa, if you will. Sub-Saharan Africa, maybe even Cush. Though the Cushites probably weren't that dark, but they were darker than the Egyptians. But that's the southern part of Egypt and into Sudan. So whatever. The point is that these are different nations that are in the area. They're major powers. However you want to understand this, it's saying that God is all with all those people. And guess what? All those people have their homeland. They all have their homeland. And here it says, it shall be said of Zion, they were all born there. It is the Most High who will preserve it. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's basically saying that all the other nations will recognize that we have a home in the land of Israel. Now, if they're saying that, by the way, that kind of implies that even back then, they were not saying that our home was Israel. I'm serious. If you think about it, they're basically saying that the Israelites they're newcomers to the land of Israel. Now, a couple things about that. The Torah, the Bible, from Genesis on, in the first book, recognizes that the Canaanites lived in the land of Israel. We also know that, at least according to the Bible, God didn't promise that land to the Canaanites, but they lived there. So at what point, let's say this was written in 700 BCE or 600 BCE, at what point do Israelites actually say, hey, this is our country and we live here. It's ours, just like the Egyptians, just like the Babylonians, just like it. But here's the weird thing. The Philistines didn't come from Philistia. They came from Greece. They came from Crete. They came from Greek islands, Aegean. They weren't from there. They weren't from the Middle East. They were people who settled there, yet they have a place there. Tyre, the Canaanites, who became we call the Phoenicians, well, that's where they come from. But did the Tyrians really come from there? Because, and we don't really know who they're talking about with the Cushites. Are they talking about people who lived there, or are they talking about people who settled there? We don't know that any of these people actually lived all the time where they were living. So the fact that like this almost tells us that at a certain point, people say that's your homeland. But all of these homelands are somewhat not real. All of these homelands, I guess you could say the Egyptians and Babylonians, but like, is there implication that those people aren't even, we don't really know, but are they really saying that the Egyptians and Babylonians don't even come from those places? But we know these ones are all people who didn't, well, we believe that they're all people who did not, at least in the biblical time, were not considered to be the native people, if you will. And then the same could be said about us. It's a weird thing because we're living in that again. I mean, we're literally watching people stand out in front of the Hillel at City University in New York this week, screaming at Jews, go back to Brooklyn, or, whatever, go back to Poland, or go back, all the stuff that they're saying right now. So it's very interesting that like this issue of being in your homeland is something that people have been really talking about for thousands of years. I don't know how long people had to live in a place for them to be considered the native people there. But it is interesting that some of the Egyptian writers that were writing during the Roman period, the Greco-Roman period, were still saying that the Israelites were not native people to Israel. They said that they were Egyptians who fled, Egyptian slaves who fled Egypt to live in the land of Israel. That's what the Egyptians said. Now, it seems like they were perverting the story of the Bible that we have, but the fact that Egyptian pagans 2,000 years ago were telling us that we're not legitimate Israelites was interesting, because it shows you that one of the purposes and one of the modes and methods that anti-Semites use is to delegitimize our connection to the land of Israel. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. And it seems like, by kind of what's implied here, that people were saying it 2,600 years ago. Why does God have to inspire us in the register of peoples that each was born there? Because people are saying that it's not true. So this happened throughout history, and people have been migrating, and people have been moving from one place to another for thousands of years. Since the beginning of human history, people have wound up in places that they didn't start. The Turks started out in Mongolia, and now they have a country called Turkey. Nobody ever says to the Turks, go back to Mongolia, right? Nobody says to the Slavs, go back. You have to leave Greece, and you have to leave Bulgaria and go back to the steppes of Russia. Nobody tells people that. Only the Jewish people get told you have to go back to a place that you lived in for a part of your history, right? Which, of course, is also associated with death and destruction. Not so much Brooklyn, but Poland, for sure. You're telling people to go back to Poland, you're essentially saying, go back to your graveyard. So anyways, it's interesting that this was an issue thousands of years ago. And yeah. Yeah. How do you feel like you're the native people? I don't know. Any comments, questions, any thoughts?
Ask the white man.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Ask the white. Yeah, but Judith, does anybody ever tell the Native Americans you have to go back to Siberia, which is where they came from? And they came
Exactly.
They came 30,000 years ago, and there doesn't seem to be any other people that were here before them, but they came in waves. What if the Native American tribes that, what if the Algonquin actually depopulated and took away the land that had been settled by people who had come here before? I assume it actually happened, by the way, but
to play with that history, then, right? The white European, let's say, claims America as its own, right? And they're not told to go back to Europe.
Yes.
And how long have they really been here?
Yeah, 200 years.
600. Well, America's been here 200 years.
Fine, but 200.
The white man, 500.
Most people in America have a relative who came here within 200 years. Most people.
Right, most people within 200 years. So
I understand. That's true. Yes, that's what Judith's point is.
That's what my point is.
People would say, yes, at a certain point, people do say that. But look, there's still people, they're Native Americans who are still fighting for land rights. And, generally speaking, we tell them you can have a casino. You tell them they can have a casino, which is what we'll tell the Palestinians in 200 years. You can open a casino. No, listen, I hope it's like, by the way, just, that happened in like 1994. We told the Palestinians in Jericho, here, we'll open a casino here in your town. And it worked for about 4 or 5 years. And then once the second intifada started, it didn't work. But yeah, Jericho had a casino for a few years. Beautiful building. You can still see it. I always point it out when we come into the West Bank. We go down to the Dead Sea. You'll see to the left as you come down, this beautiful casino. Yeah, that was, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's a similar concept, which is what we're going to help develop.
Similar political concept, right?
Yes. And the reason, of course, as we said, is that casino gambling is illegal in Israel. And so Israelis, to the contrary, do not dislike gambling. Some of the biggest poker players in the World Series are Israelis actually, but and they're always Israelis in Vegas, but they're not allowed to gamble casino gambling in Israel. The closest places they go are Turkey and Egypt, though right now those places are not really nice places for Israelis to go to. So a lot of Israeli tourists who want to gamble, who don't want to leave the area, the general area, they're going to Bulgaria now. They're going to Black Sea casinos and they're going to places in Bulgaria. But yes, they've stopped going to Turkey for the most part. Anyways, got a little off subject, but that's about people where they live. And let's take a look now at Psalm 88, 88, double eight, a psalm of the Korahites for the leader, Mahalat La'anot, a maskil of Heman the Ezrahite. Well, that's a lot of stuff. That's a whole lot of stuff. This is a shir, this is a mizmor, this is a lamnatseach for the leader. It's a bnei Korach. It's a mahalat la'anot, right? What is that? Well, we don't know. The Hebrew of meaning is uncertain. Again, maybe the musical direction, the kind of instrument it was played on. And then we have a maskil, which is another word for some kind of composition. And now we also hear of a guy that we don't really know much about, who is Heman the Ezrahite. So if we look at all of those directions, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of stuff. So a lot of direction, a lot of stuff. Of course, the Bible doesn't really describe who Haman was. So of course, the rabbis, who are writing in the Talmud, they want to know who this is. Who is this person? Because Ezrachite could mean, the word Ezrach could be the native, going back to what we were talking about before. Again, this may have been one of the Levites who King David hired to help write Psalms. We don't really know, but this is a guy who we don't know much about him. So, or we never heard of him, to put it mildly. But Haman is probably the name, and Ezrach, native born, is a tribe of Ezrach, but the word Ezrach is used for someone who's native born. All right, let's take a look at Psalm 89.
O Eternal One, God of my deliverance, when I cry out in the night before you, let my prayer reach you. Incline your ear to my cry, for I am sated with misfortune. I am at the brink of Sheol. I am numbered with those who go down to the pit. I am like someone helpless, abandoned among the dead, like bodies lying in the grave, of whom you are mindful no more, and who are cut off from your care. You have put me at the bottom of the pit, in the darkest places in the depths. Your fury lies heavy upon me. You afflict me with all your breakers, Selah. You make my companions shun me. You make me abhorrent to them. I am shut in and do not go out. My eyes pine away from affliction. I call to you, O Eternal One, each day. I stretch out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the shades rise to praise you? Selah. Is your faithful care recounted in the grave? Your constancy in the place of perdition? Are your wonders made known in the netherworld? Your beneficent deeds in the land of oblivion? As for me, I cry out to you, O Eternal One. Each morning my prayer greets you. Why, O Eternal One, do you reject me? Do you hide your face from me? From my youth, I have been afflicted and near death. I suffer your terrors wherever I turn. Your fury overwhelms me. Your terrors destroy me. They swirl about me like water all day long. They encircle me on every side. You have put friend and neighbor far from me, and my companions out of my sight.
Yeah, and that one doesn't really end on a happy note, right? A lot of times the Psalms will go through all the stuff that that is going wrong, and then, but you'll listen to me, God, you'll hear me and you'll redeem me. This one doesn't really have that. This doesn't really have but it's all going to work out good in the end. This Psalm also is interesting. Again, it's kind of, average length Psalm, 19 verses. It's not especially long, but a lot of people said that, the person who read this feels very, very messed up. Now, you know, in the old days, before we knew a lot about depression and sadness, we thought, this must be somebody physically, messed up, right? So some people said that like the person doesn't have any friends and neighbors, no one wants to be around him. Maybe he has leprosy, right? Maybe this is a guy who has leprosy or something bad, where people have to stay away from him. But there really is a sense here of hopelessness, right? There's a sense here of a person who's just very depressed. And again, what's interesting about it is it doesn't seem like it's an illness. Well, it doesn't seem like this person just got sick, right? When the person says, I've been like this since I was born, there's a feeling like I've been dealing with this my whole life. So I think it's actually a psalm that really captures, I think people have kind of missed the point of this, which is that this is really a psalm of depression. This is really a psalm of people who feel underwater. The waters swirl about me, right? They encircle me. So people who feel like they can't have friends, they can't have connections with anybody. And a person who feels literally almost dead, right? And what's interesting about it is the feeling is, God, I might as well be dead because you're not there. And what's interesting about that is that this version of death is not a happy, pleasant one. This is not, hey, we're going to heaven and everyone's going to be happy. This is, we're going to a dark place and you're not there. So this really seems to be like, some people say it's going to hell, but it doesn't say hell. It says Sheol, but Sheol is also used right here as, it says a land of oblivion. It says the dead, right? It says Rephaim, which they translated as shades, which is another word for ghosts. So there's an understanding that there is some type of existence there, but it doesn't seem like a very good existence. It seems like the kind of existence that we have described in like things like the book of Samuel, where, Saul calls up Samuel's ghost through the witch of Endor, and he comes up like, why have you disturbed me from the bottom, from the pit, from Sheol? So this understanding that like there's some existence of ours that doesn't want to be disturbed, and is just like, it's not a especially happy place, but it's also one where like you're just at kind of quiet, it's at rest. This seems to be what this is talking about. And it's also this kind of idea that like when we die, we're not with God. We're cut off, right? Because he says, are your wonders known in another world? Right? And that's a rhetorical question, right? That's not, are they? Maybe they are. No, they're not. And I'm alive right now, God. You should hear me. You should be with me because I'm here in this world with you now. Right?
And it also is like, once I'm dead, I can't do those things, God.
Exactly. And we have that other line from Psalms that we've said is, do the dead praise the Lord, right? Do the dead praise the Lord, which is an interesting idea, which seems to be like at least some level of death is not so great. Now, what do you make of these lines? Well, I'll tell you, the interesting line, the interesting take on these lines and other lines like that, pretty much the lines in the Bible. Look, people who read the Bible literally, and I'm not talking about the Christian Bible, but read our Hebrew Bible literally, including Christians, they say it doesn't seem like a really happy place, which is why some people say, yeah, that's because there's no Jesus yet. Once there's Jesus, then there's a happy place. Okay, so of course, that's not quite true because the rabbis were already writing about heaven as a happy place before the time of Jesus. We see it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We see it in the Midrash. We see it in texts early on. We see that heaven is a happy place. In the Apocrypha, in books that we have from that period, we know that Christians didn't invent that. They took it from Jewish texts about heaven. But what do you make of this? Right? So interestingly, Seventh-day Adventists believe, and I'm not saying every Seventh-day Adventist believes this, so don't go out and ask your Seventh-day Adventist friends, do you believe this? But what's taught within the church is that when you die, you don't go to heaven. You go to another world where you sleep. You're asleep until the final redemption, until the second coming, or again, the apocalypse, where all the dead will rise who are righteous, and the dead who are not righteous don't ever wake up. So if you want to wake up, you have to live a life in this world where when Jesus comes back to redeem the world, that's where the redemption is. So they don't believe people are in heaven right now. It's Seventh-day Adventist tradition. They don't believe that they're in hell necessarily, but they're sleeping. So it's an interesting take on it because they read the Bible literally and they're saying, it doesn't say in the Bible anywhere that you're in heaven until you have Jesus. So when Jesus talks about going to heaven, maybe he's only talking about people who believe in Jesus and once he comes back, once that new order is established. Judaism has a different take on it, which is, okay, so when you die to start with, you don't necessarily go right to heaven. So if a person has just died, you're kind of in a purgatory state. They're not ready to go up to the place yet. They have to go through a period of recycling, if you will, or purgatory, which is not forever, but for a limited amount of time, you go through a washing. And the better you are in this world, the less time you're here in the washing, and the less time you are in the and it's not a washing like you get to take a bath. It's you're in fire and molten lava. It's not happy washing. We're washing off all the negative parts of you, because what's going to go up is pure. And so all the parts of you that were stuck in the world, they have to be burned off. So the more of this world you take with you, the more has to be burned off. So the more you can free yourself from this world, the less of you needs to be purged, if you will.
And
so the idea of a purgatory in Judaism is really this idea that, look, if you live a holy life in this world, you really don't have to pass through this time as much as a person who really messed up. And even if a person really messes up, the understanding is they really don't have more than a year in purgatory. So when when Saul brings up Samuel, the understanding is he just passed. So he didn't go to heaven yet, but he was definitely going to heaven. Samuel, 100% is going to heaven. He's a wonderful guy. But even Samuel had some problems, right? We know that. Samuel had sons that he allowed them to kind of take advantage of his power, right? Samuel turned a blind eye to his sons, which is the same thing, by the way, that Eli, his mentor, did. You see, he did the same thing that his role model, Eli, did. He let his sons get out of control. So, Samuel wasn't perfect. Every person needs to get purged a little bit, right? They need a little bit of cleanup. So even he had to. So when the Midrash kind of tells us that when Saul called him up, he was still in that process, which is he didn't like that. He didn't like having to be disturbed. But yeah, the understanding in Judaism is, yeah, okay, so the person's not right in heaven, and this is kind of where the person is till they get there. We have a tradition that and I'm going to tell you that you know this because you know it. There's a tradition at the end of a year of mourning for somebody that we dedicate the monument, right? We do an unveiling, and we stop saying Kaddish for them every day. That doesn't mean you stop saying Kaddish for them. You say Kaddish for them on their yard site. You say Kaddish for them at Yisker services. You say yard site for them whenever you want. Kaddish, you don't stop saying Kaddish, but you stop saying it every day. The tradition of saying it every day, 3 times a day, is really, really not easy. I mean, especially if you want to do it with a minyan. If you're doing it with a minyan, it's virtually impossible. You can't leave a Jewish community for a year if you want to say Kaddish in a community with a minyan every day. It's virtually impossible. So there are people who do that during the year of their yard site. They will, of their loss for their parent or for spouse, whatever, they will not leave the area. Or if they travel, they'll make sure they're in a place where they can do minyan 3 times a day. So that's incumbent on a person who takes that rule in that way. What happens is, the understanding was that when you say Kaddish for somebody 3 times a day, you're elevating them while they're in purgatory. So what happens is when you say Kaddish and you're saying it thinking about them, you're helping them get through purgatory. You're helping them on that journey, because what happens is, on that day that you're saying it, that moment, that time that you're saying it, they feel your presence, and whatever purgatory hurts, however it hurts, whatever it feels like, that alleviates it. So when you say Kaddish for somebody, it helps them feel comforted while they're in purgatory. That's the tradition. That's where it comes from, folks. The idea of saying Kaddish for a year for somebody is also based on this understanding that they're in the netherworld. They're in a dark netherworld, not the heaven part of the afterlife. So that's a tradition that we still maintain. We still do that. You know that, Judith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, that's why when you say it. Now, the tradition, by the way, is on Shabbos. on Shabbos, the fires of purgatory are not lit. So everybody, when they die, or if they're in purgatory, at least on Shabbos, they get a day off. So that was the tradition. It doesn't mean you don't say Kaddish on Shabbos, but it means that when you don't say Kaddish on Shabbos with a minyan, if you're they're also at peace that day. And it means that Shabbos is Shabbos in hell too. So yeah, this is how, when we get to texts in the Bible that talk about death and they don't talk about heaven, you have to come up with some kind of understanding of it. You have to explain it. And the idea that when you die, you go to a dark place and that's it, did not sit well with anybody. And I don't think they were ever, I don't think it ever intended that. The issue is we don't have descriptions of the afterlife extensively in the Bible, except for a few places. And they're, again, they seem to be a place where it's dark. So was that all we had? Probably not. Probably not. But this is what we got. All right. So it also leads us to an understanding in Judaism that we got to celebrate life and we got to enjoy this world where we can, right? Where we can pray and speak to God here. Okay? So that's what that seems to be about. Now, the next psalm is Psalm 89, which also has a maskil. It's a maskil, and it says Le'etan, the Ezrachi. So Etan, is this another psalmist? Is this another Levite who's writing psalms? We don't know. But again, this guy's name is Heman, right? This guy's name is Heman, and Ezrachite, and then this guy is called Etan. Ethan. That's where we get the Hebrew name Etan, which means strength. So let's take a look at Psalm 89.
I will sing of God's steadfast love forever. To all generations, I will proclaim your faithfulness with my mouth. I declare your steadfast love is confirmed forever. There in the heavens, you establish your faithfulness. I've made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to my servant David. I will establish your offspring forever. I will confirm your throne for all generations. Selah. Your wonders, O eternal God, are praised by the heavens. Your faithfulness, too, in the assembly of holy beings. For who in the skies can equal God, can compare with God among the human beings? A God greatly dreaded in the council of human beings, held in awe by those all around. O eternal one, God of hosts, who is mighty like you, O Yah? Your faithfulness surrounds you. You rule the swelling of the sea. When its waves surge, you still them. You crushed Rahav. He was like a corpse. With your powerful arm, you scattered your enemies. The heaven is yours, the earth too, the world and all it holds. You established them. North and south, you created them. Tabor and Hermon, sing forth your name. Yours is an arm endowed with might. Your hand is strong, your right hand exalted. Righteousness and justice are the base of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness stand before you. Happy is the people who know the joyful shout, O eternal one, they walk in the light of your presence. They rejoice in your name all day long. They are exalted through your righteousness. For you are their strength in which they glory. Our horn is exalted through your favor. Truly, our shield is of God, our monarch of the Holy One of Israel. Then you spoke to your faithful ones in a vision and said, I've conferred power upon a warrior. I've exalted one chosen out of the people. I have found David, my servant, anointed him with my sacred oil. My hand shall be constantly with him, and my arm shall strengthen him. No enemy shall oppress him, no one vile afflict him. I will crush his adversaries before him. I will strike down those who hate him. My faithfulness and steadfast love shall be with him. His horn shall be exalted through my name. I will set his hand upon the sea, his right hand upon the rivers. He shall say to me, You are my Father, my God. the rock of my deliverance. I will appoint him firstborn, highest of the kings of the earth. I will maintain my steadfast love for him always. My covenant with him shall endure. I will establish his line forever, his throne as long as the heavens last. If his sons forsake my teaching and do not live by my rules, if they violate my laws and do not observe my commands, I will punish their transgression with the rod, their iniquity with plagues. But I will not take away my steadfast love from him. I will not betray my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant or change what I have uttered. I have sworn by my holiness once and for all. I will not be false to David. His line shall continue forever. His throne as the sun before me, as the moon established forever, an enduring witness in the sky. Selah. Yet you have rejected, spurned, and become enraged at your anointed. You have repudiated the covenant with your servant. You have dragged his dignity in the dust. You have breached all his defenses, shattered his strongholds. All who pass by plunder him. He has become the butt of his neighbors. You have exalted the right hand of his adversaries and made all his enemies rejoice. You have turned back the blade of his sword and have not sustained him in battle. You have brought his splendor to an end and have hurled his throne to the ground. You have cut short the days of his youth. You have covered him with shame. Selah. How long, O Eternal One, will you forever hide your face? Will your fury blaze like fire? Oh, remember how short my life is. Why should you have created every person in vain? Who can live and not see death? Can escape the clutches of Sheol? Selah. O my sovereign, where is your steadfast love of old that you swore to David in your faithfulness? Remember, O my sovereign, the abuse flung at your servants that I've borne in my bosom from many peoples, how your enemies, O Eternal One, have flung abuse at your anointed at every step. Blessed is God forever. Amen and amen.
Yeah. So when we look at this psalm, this seems to be a psalm that really picks up with David, right? It seems to be a psalm that kind of tracks David's life. I mean, obviously it's a fairly long psalm. You know, it goes into 53 lines to be precise, but it's 50 lines, over 50 lines. So it's a very long psalm. This guy, Ethan the Ezrahite, we read about him in Kings, in the book of Kings. And it mentions Ethan the Ezrahite. So we don't know if this is the guy who wrote this psalm, was part of the court, but this idea that God is going to keep this faith with King David's line is pretty interesting, right? This is a psalm that seems to like magnify, glorify God's relationship with King David, right? King David is, even if his descendants do wrong, they'll be punished, but they're not, the line is not going to come to an end. Now, of course, it's interesting because we have people who, well, probably almost every person who's Jewish, was born Jewish, has a DNA connection to King David. I mean, there's a lot of people who have family connections where they would say, well, I know I'm a descendant of so-and-so, and according to tradition, this person was a descendant of King David. So like there's families that, you know, have very long family trees. And if they have that, then they'll say, look, if you go back this far, we're definitely related to David. But the point is that virtually every Jewish person who, you know, is 97% or more Ashkenazic probably has a relation back to King David. So technically speaking, this is not incorrect. But the idea that David's line and David's rule through his family in the land of Israel would last forever and ever, well, that came to an end in 586 when the Babylonians destroyed it. Now, look, for Christians, this is important because they believe that Jesus was a descendant of David. And so when he becomes, when he is anointed, that he is now he's David's descendant who is, who's enduring, right? Yeah, from Judah, right? From the city of Bethlehem. Now, it does say that his descendants are going to be punished if they don't do the right thing, right? It says that they're going to be punished. It also says that they have children. So it's very important that that the Davidic line continues, at least from the standpoint of this psalm, that this will continue, right? It says, if his sons forsake my teaching, forsake my Torah, or do not live by my rules. So what's interesting is that they're not necessarily going to be perfect people, and we know that. But was this psalm written during David's lifetime, or was it written afterwards, when his descendants had already started screwing up? We don't know. I mean, this really could have been written in David's life, because David went through some very difficult times while he was king, especially when Absalom kicked him out of Jerusalem and he had to run out of town. So is it written during David's lifetime, or is it written, hundreds of years later to explain the ups and downs of David's family? But there is this understanding again that that Davidic line is really, really important. But I will tell you, it's difficult to read this and say, okay, well, this is talking about Jesus. Because if it is talking about Jesus, and again, a lot of Christians have read this psalm and have used it as an explanation for Jesus, there really is a sense that this isn't happening. It doesn't finish with one person, right? It says that it says that, and by the way, here's the reference again to Rahab, who was crushed by God. So Rahab is used there again. Doesn't seem to be so much about the Egyptians, but about God crushing this primeval monster. And also, again, God speaking in a divine council, or some kind of place around divine beings. What's interesting about it is it says right here, B'nai Elim. This is the phrase for B'nai Elim, but it's not the only phrase that's used. It also uses a Kahal Kedoshim, which literally means a congregation of holy things, or of holy people. It doesn't mean necessarily angels, but okay, let's understand it as a Kahal, as a congregation, and Kedoshim are angels. But here it doesn't say gods, it says Kedoshim. And here it's paralleled with B'nai Elim. So the B'nai Elim and the Kahal Kedoshim go together. They're used somewhat interchangeably. Here again, Besod Kedoshim, there's the holy beings. So they translate it as holy beings. They didn't translate it as divine beings that they use for Elim. So they are using a different word so you can recognize it. So you can see that, God's manifesting power over the primeval monsters, over the earth. You created the earth, right? You created the earth, and you created the heaven, right? And it says north and south, right? Both ends of the poles, if you will, or both ends of the world. And here it says specifically those two mountains, Tabor and Hermon. So Hermon is really far in the north. It's in the border of Syria, right? It's where Israel can have a little bit of skiing, right there on the border. And then Tabor, Mount Tabor, is further south in the Galilee. It's not one end of the country to the other. It's one end of the Galilee to the other. It's not the whole world, but it is a big part of the northern part of Israel. But it is the Jordan Valley, from the big mountain of Tabor. It's not that big, but to the mountain of Hermon. So that's God's, manifestations of God's power, these beautiful mountains. Anything else? Gosh, I'm going to turn down the air. It's too cold. Even I will tell you it's too cold. What's the temperature, John? I saw you play with it. I liked it.
I brought my polar fleece during the hottest part of the summer.
What? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it says it's 77, but it's not.
No, not if
I'm
the
turning
door is
I'm
open.
turning it down. Even I will tell you it's cold. But
That'd be
oof,
freezing.
back. I told you I got these flu shots and they're
I'm feeling good.
tiring me out now. They told me to. I don't know. Get it over with, I guess. Oh man. And then I worked out this morning too. So I was like, oh gosh, probably shouldn't have done that. Anyways,
Not.
look at that. So David seems to be alive. It seems to be like this is talking about the future of the Davidic line, but maybe not. Maybe it's written after this stuff has already happened. But again, this psalm seems to tell you how important it is for the Davidic line to be doing the right thing and also for them to be there, for them to continue, which is again why there's so much focus on it in the Christian Bible. That's why we have the book of Matthew giving us a lineage of Jesus back to David. If Jesus is the son of God, who cares whether he's the son of David? The answer is Jews did, because if he wasn't the son of David, then he wasn't a king. He wasn't a ruler. He couldn't be the king. So he had to be. And in order to be the Messiah, he had to be a descendant of King David. He could not be from another line. Any other questions, points, anything else in this we know very little. We know very little. It has the book of Matthew and gives us his lineage through Joseph. Psalm 89. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen, amen, is not part of the psalm. You know that. That's the end of this section of Psalms, right? We've come to another end of a book of Psalms. So, but we have some time, so let's read a little bit more. But that is 89. Whenever you see the words Baruch Adonai leolam, amen, amen, that was the editors putting in a little. Exactly. So we saw that before, and what it is again is it's an indication that this is an end of the book. A book of Psalms, which again, there were 5 books of Psalms to mirror the 5 books of the Torah. And so the Psalms were, I'll just pop it right up here so you can see it. So you can impress your friends with this knowledge that the sections of Psalms are as follows. We're now finished the 3rd book of Psalms, which, by the way, I mean, if you want to know the truth, the Psalms that actually make their way into the Jewish stuff are really kind of in the last 2 books. I mean, that doesn't mean that Psalms we talk about are not important or famous. Obviously, Psalm 23. But a lot of the Psalms that we talk about and that we've talked about traditionally, by the way, I don't know that Psalm 23 was always as important to Jews. It's hard to figure out. It was always important, don't get me wrong. But I think as Christians had been using it at funerals, I think then to some extent Jews wanted to have it at their funerals too. And of course, it's not inappropriate, but Psalm 121 was oftentimes the psalm that we did at funerals and still do. Yeah, I do. And so that's in this last section. But yeah, it says every time that we come to an end of a book, it closes with a doxology, a benediction. Those divisions were probably introduced by the final editors to imitate the 5-fold division of the Torah. So as I said, there's levels and layers of editing. And one of the last layers of editing is putting it into 5 books and ending each one with, again, a doxology, which is a very fancy way of saying something that's really, really important. This is one of the most famous ones. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, now, and always, in the age of his. Amen, amen, amen. So we have those. We have ones too. We have a other one that you know too is the Lord's Prayer. Is considered a doxology. We have a doxology in Judaism, which is known as. I'll put it up here for you so you can see it. It's really famous. It's the Kaddish, and it might actually use the word doxology right up in the front.
Nope.
Yeah. So let's see if it uses the word. Let's see where it first says the word doxology.
Nope.
Yeah, the Kaddish is an origin a closing doxology to a Godic discourse. Most of us are in Aramaic. So look, I don't really care whether it's a doxology or not. That's a stupid road to go down. But I want to tell you that it was, to some extent, a version of a doxology that we have. Doxologies are basically prayers that are statements of God's existence, but not asking God for anything, right? We don't ask God to do anything. I guess you could say we end with Oseh Shalom, which is Oseh Shalom, God make peace. God who makes peace. It doesn't necessarily even asking God, but maybe I think maybe it's kind of asking God, but the prayer itself is not asking God of anything. It's praising God and saying that God is beyond all our prayers. So it's saying we're going to pray to you, God, now, but we really have a hard time doing it because you're so important, so big, so beyond that we can't really do it, which is why we try to remind ourselves of that. Now, I told you, we're going to read another prayer. And this one is the Tefillah Moshe. This is Psalm 90. And what's interesting is this psalm is traditionally actually one of the psalms that we say during the high holidays. It's actually Psalm 90 is a psalm that very appropriate for and a lot of Machzorim, even non-Orthodox Machzorim, will put it in the Machzor for high holidays. People also would read it, Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, Shabbat Nachamu. But an understanding like this is a psalm of comfort. This is a psalm of well, you'll see. So just simply starts with Tefillah Moshe Ish HaElohim, which is a prayer of Moses, who was a man of God, an Ish Elohim, a agent of God is fine, but it's a man of God, man of God, which is probably what the King James says. What does it say? Man of God. Agent seems a little, I don't know. I'm God's agent. I'm representing God in this discussion right now, right? We'll have no use of God until we can straighten out the language of this contract. No, it's not that kind of agent, anyways. But this is a prayer of Moses. Let's look at what we thought was a prayer of Moses. Was this written in Moses' time? We don't know, but maybe you can see why we thought it might be the kind of thing Moses would say. So let's read it.
Oh, my sovereign, you have been our refuge in every generation. Before the mountains came into being, before you brought forth the earth and the world from eternity to eternity, you are God. You returned humans to dust. You decreed, return, you mortals. For in your sight, 1,000 years are like yesterday that has passed, like a watch of the night. You engulf mortals in sleep. At daybreak, they are like grass that renews itself. At daybreak, it flourishes anew. By dusk, it withers and dries up. So we are consumed by your anger, terror struck by your fury. You have set our iniquities before you, our hidden sins in the light of your face. All our days pass away in your wrath. We spend our years like a sigh. The span of our life is 70 years, or given the strength, 80 years. But the best of them are trouble and sorrow. They pass by speedily, and we are in darkness. Who can know your furious anger? Your wrath matches the fear of you. Teach us to count our days rightly, that we may obtain a wise heart. Turn, O Eternal One, how long? Show mercy to your servants. Satisfy us at daybreak with your steadfast love, that we may sing for joy all our days. Give us joy for as long as you have afflicted us, for the years we have suffered misfortune. Let your deeds be seen by your servants, your glory by their children. May the favor of my sovereign, our God, be upon us. Let the work of our hands prosper. Oh, prosper the work of our hands.
Yeah, which seems kind of redundant, but it is pretty much exactly what it says. But you can see why we read this at high holidays, right? There's a sense here of our impermanence, a sense of our death, and a sense that we're supposed to have at high holidays, which is, God, you know all the stuff we've done. Now, of course, there's also a sense in here, which is, of course, what we ask for with God is forgiveness and understanding that life is kind of rough. So can you help us out?
Text says about 7 years for
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the places we get. So Mike asked about 83-year-old second bar mitzvah. Yeah, it comes here from the Psalms. And it's not the only place where it says the span of our life is 70 years. But we have this line, 70 years. And if we get more than that, then we got a blessing, right? Now, some people, of course, don't like this because it seems to imply that, we get 70 years and after that, but it's bonus time. But I will tell you this, there is an understanding, and by the way, it's not actually funny because our lifespan in the US, at least for males, has been going down the last couple of years. We seem to have reached a plateau. Yeah, I guess you could make that argument. There's definitely a feeling here that we're not here for a very long time. And compared to you, God, we're like a breath. And we're like grass that, is alive one moment and is gone the next. So there's this understanding that we're not here a long time. And I do think that that's an important thing to think about, which is, what are we going to do in this time that we're here in this world, right? What are we going to do? So obviously we don't want to be doing a lot of iniquities, right? We don't want to be doing a lot of the wrong thing during that time. And here, by the way, is that line, you engulf mortals in sleep. At daybreak, they're like grass. There's another one of those lines that it seems like when we die, we go to sleep. Yeah. That, we're not functioning the way we get to in this world. So you see in our prayers and you see in our Psalms and you see in our values that Judaism really values life. And that's why we are not really eager to die. We're not really eager to martyr ourselves. We're not really eager to sacrifice our lives because it seems like this world is really, really good, or at least has the potential to be good. Because again, this guy's saying, man, I've had a lot of bad days, right? I've had a lot of bad days. But this line, teach us to count our days, right? Teach us to count our days is a very famous phrase in Judaism, which is let's make our days count. Let's do what we can, not just to, consider our lives, but to consider what we should be doing in our lives, to have a levav chachma, to have a wise heart, to have a sense of wisdom, make us consider our lives. And some of that wisdom, right, comes about through understanding our mortality. To understand we're mortal gives us a sense of purpose, right? And this psalm definitely gives us that. It also scares us a little bit, which is why we say it at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because we realize this might be our last year. Look, if you're there at services on Rosh Hashanah, if you're wherever you are on Rosh Hashanah, even if you're not in shul, wherever you are on Rosh Hashanah, if you're alive, you don't know for sure that you'll be here next Rosh Hashanah. That's the point. And so when we say it, we say to ourselves, look, I hope you'll catch, let me have a break and help me do that. Because I know that life is finite. I know that our time here is limited. And I really hope it's not going to be bad. I really hope that it's going to be roughly, my friends, what the lifespan is in the United States, 70 to 80 years. That's a little bit older for women now, but that's the lifespan, my friends. It's not really that much different. So, it's, like nowadays, if somebody dies in their 70s, we say, oh, they died kind of young. But it's not in some countries. And again, people focus on that line. They also focus on teach us to number our days. There's actually a book that came out a few years ago called, it's a while ago, actually, Number Our Days, about aging, about Jewish aging. But it's also really, really, really important here. Here's a line that people have used. I talk about this sometimes with people, they'll say to me, like, what do Orthodox Jews teach about creation? Like, how can Orthodox Jews not be creationists? I say, well, it's not that they're not. It's not that Orthodox Jews don't believe in creation by God. They just have a different take on it. They say, well, but do they really believe the earth is 6,000 years old? And I say, no. They believe that some of the years that God made the world in might have not been a day, right? A day might have not been one day. A day might have been, as it says right here, 1,000 years. Because the wonderful line that we just had here in Tehillim, and again, it's Psalms, it's not Genesis, but it does say that for God, 1,000 years is like a day. right? It's like a day. So if we talk about God looking at creation before they're human beings, and it was a day, then maybe the first week took 7,000 years. Now, again, we could say, well, it didn't take 7,000 years, it took millions of years. But we could also say, billions of years, we could also say that again, when the Bible is talking about this poetically, it's also, and by the way, we're going to read a line tomorrow night at Talmud. If you come with us, you can read an interesting line about how many planets there are in how many stars there are. Forget planets. How many stars there are in the Talmud. How many stars the rabbis say there are, which is kind of amazing. But here, this understanding that maybe God computes time differently than we do lends itself to an understanding that Jewish Orthodox, really traditional people say, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be 6,000 years. It could be, again, that the first day took 1,000,000 years, right? So they have no issue with interpreting it a little differently because of this line. So this line here is actually a really important line for us in the Bible because it allows for a non-literal way of understanding how time passes. And so it allows an opening for an understanding of not a 6-day creation.
So tell us again where the 6,000 comes from.
What do you mean?
Like
Oh,
how?
it comes from computing how many years from Adam and Eve. So
Oh, okay.
if Adam and Eve are created on the 6th day of creation, that means
Right.
we're at 57, what is it, 5785 coming up. That would mean that we are that's again
That's counting, basically it's counting the generations
correct.
in the
It's
Bible.
correct. Counting the years of Noah's life, right? And Adam's life, adding up those years and knowing that Noah would have died just before, based on how long his lifespan is, just before Abraham was born. And Abraham was born around 2000
Right.
BCE. And Moses was born around 1200 BCE. So that's how but 1200 years before, BCE would mean basically in the year on the Hebrew calendar of 2680, whatever it was for Moshe. So they would say Moshe was born in the year 2600. It's not exact, by the way, it's not exactly what it says, but yes, Moses was born in that year, and then King David was born in the year 2400, so et cetera. So, sorry, 20, going the wrong way.
Are there any sects of Judaism that go 600 years without the with quote unquote true creationism?
Oh, well, I mean, look, if you're talking about Jewish folks who don't care about science at all, then yeah, they wouldn't even engage in it. But that line allows them to say that God doesn't compute time the way you and I do. So if it says that this happened in a day, and people say that didn't happen in a day, it's not just with creation, it's with other things in the Bible that it says it's like a day. Well, it's not literally a day. It's a day to God. So it does open it up, to anybody. And I've never talked to somebody who said, well, that's not what it means. It just said, Elef Shanim Beinecha, in your eyes, God, is a yom.
Right.
It's a day. So that's a really important line for traditional Judaism, for those who want to interpret time differently. It opens it up. And people ask me that all the time. How do people John, you said it to me a few months ago. How do people understand creation if they're Orthodox Jews? And I say, because of this line opens that up. Of course. I don't know. God has, as we're going to read tomorrow night, God has a lot of planets, a lot of stars to take hold of, to keep track of. But that's why I say to people, if there turns out to be life on other planets, which I believe there is something on other planets, just the odds are too high that there's something on other planets. You know the story, right? That Robin Williams came into audition for Gary Marshall for Mork and Mindy, for Mork when he came on to Happy Days. And Gary Marshall said, well, how did you pick Robin Williams to be Mork? He says, well, he was the only extraterrestrial who came into audition. That's what he said. So yeah, there are people who do feel like they're from another planet. but he was the only extraterrestrial who came in. But there is possible life on other planets, and if there is, for us as Jews, it's not a problem. The Talmud says, and places even alluded to, maybe the rabbis were deriving that from places in the Torah, that God has lots of planets or lots of stars. There's lots of places that God is in the universe. And yeah, we'll get to it. It's in the quadrillions if you do the math. But yeah, so it doesn't really pose a challenge to us. It poses a challenge to some faiths. It's a faith.
Are we listening to any today?
Tomorrow. Wait.
Are we
Wait.
lis-
Mark Kelly gave the a number of planets there are in the universe. Yeah. So the odds that there's some kind of life on those planets is not a problem for us. I mean, I would say, again, when it comes down that there is, it's not going to be a problem for us because we'll say God made that planet. God's creation is everywhere. It says it everywhere. It says it everywhere in our Bible. It ain't my problem. No, it isn't, because if we're Jewish and we say, oh, there's life on other planets, they worship whatever. You'd say, okay, well, they worship that. That's not the issue. The issue is, does Jesus save those people? Seriously, that's not an issue that we have to worry about. It's not an issue. It is an issue, but it is an issue. It is an issue. It is an issue for Christians. It is an issue for Christians. Oh yeah, it's a big issue. Mike, it's a big issue. It's a huge issue. I will tell you that look, I'm not a conspiracist, right? I really am not. Like, I don't think people can keep their mouth shut. So if there's a conspiracy that's really been around for a long time, I'm shocked because people can't keep their mouth shut. So
Be careful when they come, they say have a cookbook.
they have the cookbook. That's right. But here's what I think. I think that if people knew that there was life on other planets, it could be suppressed because it can be a major shock to some of the world's religions. Do I think that if the world's religions knew that there was life on another planet and they have to deal with that, would they have a problem? Absolutely. Not Judaism, though. But we're the smallest world religion there is. So who cares whether we have a problem with it? The reality is that it ain't going to be a challenge for me. It's not going to be a challenge for Orthodox Jews. It's not going to be a challenge for Honi. It's not going to be a challenge for anybody. You can ask almost any Jew I know, is there life on other planets? From any walk of life they're in, I'm going to say, yeah, maybe. Who knows? Who cares? If it happens, it happens. We'll deal with it then. For some religions in this world, it'll be a make or break moment. Oh yeah. And so if it's being suppressed, it wouldn't surprise me, because the Catholic Church, which is super powerful, and other churches that are powerful, but nothing's as powerful as the Catholic Church. But if there's evidence of it, there's 100% a vested interest in making sure that it's not there. And that doesn't mean that they have it. I'm just saying it would 100% make sense that there are powers that really don't want that information out there. So will it get out there? I guess. I mean, if it's there, I think at some point it's going to come out. But I do think that there is a vested interest in what some people have to make sure that it doesn't come out. And when it does, they'll have to deal with it, and we won't. Honestly, we won't have to deal with it. We'll wake up the next day, we'll go, oh, wow, that's great. It's exciting, whatever. Let's figure out what it means. Unless they're going to eat us. And if they're going to eat us, we better get ready for it. Well, folks, we did not get to Psalm 91 or 92, which is the Psalms we were going to listen to, but I didn't think necessarily we would. Next week, I promise, I know. The next psalm we're going to get into will be in 91, but when we get into Psalm 92 next week, we are going to hear some beautiful versions of Psalm 92, one of the really, really pretty psalms and one that we use a lot because it's Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat Tov Leodot LaAdonai. It's a psalm of Shabbat, and we love it because it tells us that our ancestors love Shabbat. They love Shabbat. We love Shabbat, and we continue to sing songs about Shabbat. So we have a lot of versions of Psalm 92 known as Mizmor Shir. So we'll didn't listen to music today, but we will listen to music, I promise you, next week. So hopefully we'll see everybody next week. And maybe we'll see you tomorrow night. And we'll see you in the coming weeks as we get ready for the new year. Oh, wait, before we leave. Thank you, Mike, for not reminding me. Come on, man. Got to hear it, man. Got to hear it. Yeah, I love this, right?
What?
Sound a little shofar right here.
Oh, it's right.
I don't know what it is. It's prettier. All right, Shana Tova, everybody.
Hey, Mark,
Shana
quick-
Tova. Yes.
Question, is there a
Oh,
date?
tomorrow night is tonight. Sorry, tonight is our meeting on Israel too.
Is there,
After, if you want to come after the debate, you can do that. If you don't want to watch the debate, come there too. Yes, sorry. What?
that's okay. Is there a date yet for the wine and cheese?
Oh, for our house, wine
Yeah.
and cheese?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, you can come over anytime, Judith, to have wine and cheese in our house.
Thanks,
No, I will
Mark.
tell you right now, it's fair. I think we're doing it. I think my wife was, maybe we didn't put it out yet because we're not 100% sure, but I believe it's going to be, I will tell you right now, I believe it is wine and cheese is, it's either Saturday night or Sunday, but I think she was talking about maybe doing it on Saturday night this year on the 9th. Yes, it's Saturday the 19th, at least. That's what she has on my calendar.
Okay.
What? Yeah, right. So if you want to come tonight to the committee meeting that we have tonight, you can please come and wine and cheese the 19th.
Corner Bakery Thursday.
Oh yeah, Corner Bakery Thursday. Thank you. See, it's doing your job. Thank you, John and Mike, for making it do it,
And
make it happen.
Saturday night at the beach.
And Saturday night at the
See you
beach.
all there.
Saturday night at Judith's house for the beach.
My house. You're all welcome.
Stuff coming up. A lot of stuff coming up. All right. Take care, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.